Hello and welcome to the Wonkette Weekend Live Chat. I am Robin Panacchia, and as always, the lovely and talented Stephen Robinson. How you doing today, Stephen?
I'm well, Robin. How are you?
I'm swell, and I will be better if you guys like, share, and subscribe. I did it so well last time.
Yes.
So I have a question for you on this sacred holiday, Stephen. How do you like your jazz?
I like it very steaming hot.
Yeah.
Um, it's very interesting you mentioned that not just because it's Dame Julie Andrews' birthday, but um, there was something circulating from some
Oh
particular
yeah, I
loser
posted that yesterday.
about how jazz is not actually music, and so which is all just racially charged. It's not even just like
Oh yeah.
perhaps not
No.
liking hip hop. It's like, no, no, no. This is clearly it's right next door to classical with just some tweaks. Your issue is
Mhm.
that
You
black
actually
people
have to
are
know
performing.
music so much better, like, than almost any other genre in order to play jazz, because you have to, like, know the form in order to break it. Like, that is very common knowledge. Happy birthday, Darren.
Um,
Um,
yeah, happy birthday, and with respect, it's like having a birthday on Christmas. No one really
yeah.
cares, but we do. I'm just saying, it's like if you
I
have
mean,
your birthday
everyone
on
else is
Christmas.
obviously busy celebrating Dame Julie Andrews' birthday today.
Yes, I am a big fan of hers, obviously, but it's interesting. I listen to the cast recording of My Fair Lady constantly, but I've always been kind of bitter that she never did the film. I love,
Well, because
uh,
the crazy reason why she didn't do it, right?
yes, but can you share with the folks at home?
Yeah, they were like, "You know what? Sorry, Julie Andrews, you're not famous enough yet," which is insane to
True.
think about. Like, they were like,
In
"We're gonna,"
19 at the time, yes,
yeah,
Audrey Hepburn was far more famous.
but she could
Similar,
not sing.
they got
Which is,
around that. Yes,
yeah,
we'll get around that. And it was not a surprise for anyone who had seen Funny Face that Audrey
yeah,
Hepburn has many talents, but singing perhaps is not one of them. But that was fine for Funny Face, one of my favorite musicals. But
mhm.
for this film, it was quite the challenge. She's great. I
It's
want to
actually,
clarify. Audrey Hepburn is wonderful because she
yeah,
plays the role very well. She's an amazing actor, but she's obviously not Julie Andrews. Julie Andrews did very well with the wonderful shade throwing when she won her Oscar to thank the
mhm.
people who denied her. She literally thanked them first because, of course, that allowed her to do the film that got her the Oscar.
Mhm.
So, but yes, she's great. I don't enjoy. I mean, I've seen Sound of Music. In my youth, it was every Easter or something, and I think but I've never enjoyed it as much as I think other films that I think people like
It
SNL
is
or
not, it is
Star or
not
Victor
made for
Victoria,
everybody.
stuff like that. Yeah, so those are my favorites
Oh,
of hers.
won't you play me the jazz hot, baby? Come on, Steven. Don't participate.
I
It's holding my soul together. I realize that's a different lyric, but yeah.
yes, I'm actually sitting right below my Victor Victoria show poster from the Broadway show, but it is you cannot see it from here. But she's above Sir Patrick Stewart. But on to actual some I guess relevant news. So America averted a potentially catastrophic government shutdown when Kevin McCarthy I basically folded and made a deal with Democrats, which has now earned him the wrath of Matt Getz, who I
Yes.
think on the Sunday shows, Michael will probably be writing about this. He has threatened to um, do his motion to vacate the speakership because McCarthy dared to keep the government open or to at work of Democrats. Matt Getz is an idiot, and we all know this, but he just seems fundamentally either uninterested or incapable of governing. And it's something we see this
Yeah.
back with the Tea Party, which is the idea John Boehner was in fits over it, which is just like, well, we're all about brute force and power. We're Republicans. We get that. But okay, we don't. we don't have the Senate, we don't have the White House. I can't will the Affordable Care Act to be repealed,
Because
and you
here's
can
the thing, like,
aggravate
they
it, you
don't
can't
care.
will.
Basically, what they want is for the government to be shut down and for Democrats to eventually like be forced to cave because they actually care if,
Mhm.
people are getting paid or and what have you.
Yeah, I think it looked like all data was obviously Republicans would be blamed for it. It was done so it wasn't like even previous shutdowns so they could possibly it was going to look so McCarthy caved. Hakeem Jeffries bailed him out,
Hmm.
and I've clarified this as well, that it's not bailing out McCarthy, it's bailing out the United States because human beings would have been harmed if they're not getting paid. The government gets shut down. This is beyond sort of the theater. But what's interesting is that we talk about it's just so interesting because if you've written about criminal justice and whatever and how in broad daylight we have this multiple indicted you know threat to national security,
Yeah.
like literally uh, saying, "Please shut down the government so they can't prosecute me." So, like if Tyrone Jenkins says on Twitter, "Please, hey, go tear down a CVS," so they so that like that is about equal. He is basically saying cause clear damage to the economy and to human beings to avoid my being prosecuted for crimes is
Yes.
obstruction, is almost a terrorist attack. And I get it. It's very tough to sort of figure out what to do. I think Jack Smith has especially after the comments about Mark Miley, has said, okay, well, let's put a gag order on this guy because he
Mhm.
is a threat to everyone. So, Robin, you had written about some of his comments, Trump's comments over the weekend, as a indicted person, basically saying anyone under suspicion of a crime should be summarily shot in the back, which is obviously not something he believes should apply to him.
No, no, of course not. He's the exception to that rule. Um, it's actually kind of interesting because like so much of what he's in trouble for right now is telling his supporters to go and do crimes. And now he's like out there on Friday being like, "Hey, I'm going to make it so you guys can shoot shoplifters in cold blood," which is not actually a thing he can do because that would be like I mean, that would involve like an entire overhaul of everything and would also make life really scary because not every people think are shoplifting are actually shoplifting. Like it is,
Yeah,
but this is the thing. It's actually frightening to me how absolutely hungry they are, how much they cheered, um, like for like being able to shoot someone for, stealing a tube
oh,
of
sure.
Maybelline Great Lash. Like that is like the most wonderful Christmas present you could ever give these people. Hey, I'm giving you like impunity to go shoot someone, which they won't get, and then someone's going to go do it, and they're going to say, "Oh, but Trump said I could," and it's going to be January 6th all over again, and they'll be,
Yeah. Well, January 6th, that was an instance of and slow walking from Merrick Garland and so far for the federal case. I mean, I think what Trump and I think a lot of Republicans, I think you can't sort of necessarily minimize the threat of this because there are certain prosecutors in many parts of the country, and not even just in quote unquote red states or Republican controlled uh, areas where they just wouldn't prosecute it. They would go on Fox News and say, "I'm not going to prosecute this store owner just trying to protect their business and their livelihood, and let that be a lesson." I mean, DeSantis has similar things with its anti protest laws and so forth. And so there is the risk that certain DAs would refuse to prosecute this or would not, or it becomes a wedge issue that even certain Democrats in places like Minnesota and others would not want to make it an issue for them. Um, it is always dangerous to get the extent that's Trump's danger is that there are people who are willing to just ignore not just the law, because the law is sometimes whatever people say it
Mhm.
is, but just any sort of kind of moral standing is sort of the idea that, like, summarily executing someone who stole a pack of cigarettes or something compared to the idea that you would never summarily execute Bernie Madoff or someone who commits tons, far more, on a higher level of
Because people
financial
are actually
impact.
more, like, generally speaking, people are more, immediately angry about, something like shoplifting than they are about Bernie Madoff, like
Mhm.
those kinds of people. I also think that, like, the whole, you know, Kyle Rittenhouse thing definitely empowered them to believe that they were going to get to, like, kill people
Oh yeah,
and get away with it because he did. But as I wrote earlier this week, there was a guy who was working at an auto parts store and decided to, go and kill someone who was, I guess, running off with a steering wheel. I don't really know what I've run out of auto parts. I don't know what people buy at parts stores. I'm sorry, or shoplift. I don't know. I don't drive. But and he kills a guy. He kills a guy, and now he's going to go to prison for 9 to 41 years because he was that upset about a shoplifter. And if you look it up right now, there are like there are not only uh instances of people trying to kill shoplifters, there are also, and I consider this equally important, instances of people being shot or killed or otherwise injured by the shoplifters they are trying to, like, tackle. And that is, part of the reason why, when you work retail, like, there are a lot of reasons why you're not supposed to confront shoplifters when you work retail. And one of the first ones is your personal safety because
yeah,
you don't know what if the people are crazy. I had a woman throw a purse at my head because she couldn't return it. Because it was final sale because it was a dressy purse. And, like, people are freaking crazy, okay? You do not want to confront shoplifters because you don't know what they're carrying. It's not going to end well. Better that they should
yeah,
walk off with, like, a thing than someone dies. And I can't believe that this is even, like, an issue.
yeah. When I was working at the Marriott Marquis when Julie Andrews was performing there, so some time ago, one of my first days, one of the uh, ushers, this very older lady, hilarious, wonderful woman, but I adored her. She was explaining to me about how, I guess, a few years back, one of the ushers came upon some guy urinating on the outside the theater, and he goes and says, like, stop, blah blah whatever, and the guy turns around and slits his throat. I of course
Yep.
had questions like, where was the, like, how was the hand, or how was he do it, like, where was it, an extra hand, like how, but that was not important. What was important was this guy was dead. And then she says, Les, that's what you got to understand, Stephen. Don't stick your neck out for no one. And that's a classic bogey line, but she said it. Not only did she say it, the bogey line, she said it like bogey, and she kind of looked like bogey. Like, so just imagine a, like 70 something usher at a Broadway theater who looks and sounds like Humphrey Bogart. That was her. She was delightful. But it was sort of my lesson. Like, just, yeah, why am I getting involved in this? Like, it is not, but it's this idea of even that, which is unacceptable, but, the shoplifting, whatever. It's the idea of very people at, not making a lot of money, trying to maintain a sort of structure for very wealthy people who
Mhm.
will not they're not going to help you when like, they're not going to take care of your family when you're now
Oh
dead
yeah.
because you tried to stop a guy from urinating, and they're not going to bail
I mean,
you out
I
of
did not
prison
mess
when
with
you're
any
sentenced.
of the, dressing room poop bandits. I never knew, for some reason, we could never figure out who they were. But yeah, that's a thing. I've mentioned it before. People poop in dressing rooms. No one understands it. No one knows who is doing it or why. But it is
Is-
a
isn't it
very
very isn't it very quiet in there?
Not always. Like, I mean,
Uh,
it's gonna depend. Um, here's the thing, like, when I was a kid, um, some guy gave someone the finger in Boston traffic and got his head blown off. And that's why my mom was always like, "Don't ever give someone the finger in traffic because they might blow your head off."
yeah,
And I think that, like, there is this, like, like, deep desire in some people to, like, almost die for, like, risk their life for a cause. And they're like hearing this and they're like, "This is now my cause." I can't go to war for a stupid reason. I'm not going off to Iraq to help, some companies get cheap oil, and murdering children there. I've got to start, taking down shoplifters
yeah.
because
Well, and
patriotism and, like,
corporations are helping with this, right? Like, so they're doing this whole like Target has left downtown Portland, and the narrative which they are helping promote is that it's because of shoplifting, and they've tried everything and they've done everything to, but it's so no, the
yeah,
shoplifting, we
they
have
could
to
try
leave,
hiring people is what they could try.
and it is spun in the sense of, okay, well, beyond what you just mentioned, but obviously retail has been taking on the chin, especially post COVID, when people started learning, like, oh, it's kind of easy. I can do a lot of shopping from my couch or whatever. So a lot of this has been occurring, but it's being promoted in a sense of blame, you know, blame the underclass. Those are the reasons this is happening,
Oh,
pitting
absolutely.
people against each other. So the idea is that, well, not only are you losing this Target, and there was one in Seattle near where I used to live that also is closing down. And so they're blaming the shoplifters, but also it's a way to fire people and say, well, it's not us. We're not just trying to do this so we can make sure we get nice bonuses next year. It is these people. So go and shoot them. And
Well, it's,
that's not.
honestly, it's an excuse a lot of the time for, like, why they're shutting down stores. Like, they're not, no, I'm sorry, you're not losing so much money through shoplifting that you're shutting down stores rather than hiring a few more people to, like, stand in the dressing room. Like, the main way I am a loss prevention expert, as I will tell you if you are hiring me to manage your ladies apparel store. And the way that you do that is just by, like, being present. If you look at, like, any study forever, the main thing that you know deters crime is not, oh, you're going to get punished, oh, you're going to get murdered, oh, it's going to be so bad if you get caught. It's the assurance that you're going to get caught. Like, so actually having people on the floor noticing whether or not people are stealing things, that's going to actually, deter more uh, shoplifting than anything else. Have you been to a Target dressing room recently?
Me? No, God, no. Uh,
Okay. Well, I
please.
have. They don't have anyone working the dressing room. They're not counting items. They're not counting items in or out, and, like, that is probably the like, you could literally just shove stuff in your purse, wear it underneath your clothes. I'm not trying to give
Mhm.
people shoplifting tips here, but, um and walk on out and no one's going to be any the wiser. Like, it is unfortunately, like, not that hard. um and these are things that I think of because I did work retail for a long time, not because I'm a thief. Although, we all had our issues in high school.
Yeah.
But
And
it's
you
just,
now could have been shot in the back for
yeah.
that issue
But,
now.
there was a thing recently where Costco was like, they compared Costco versus Target, and Costco was like, we're not having a shoplifting problem. And yes, part of that is because it is very difficult to, you know, march a giant box of Fruit Loops out the front door of
Yes.
Costco. But
So
also,
very, very
they have
large.
people on the floor. They don't have people, like, they have self checkout, but there are people monitoring the self checkout in, some fashion. Also, self checkout. People are going to steal because of self checkout, even inadvertently. I've done it by mistake.
Mm, I
Like,
see.
no, I did because, like, it was a confusing thing. I ended up getting, like, more cannoli than I needed. Because someone had actually, it's a long story. Um, I ended up with like 2 things of cannoli chips. But like all of the like this doesn't happen if you have actual people working the registers. They just don't want to pay people a living wage. They want to replace people with robots, and this is what happens. It's not people are bad, and they're gonna steal from you, and then people should go shoot them because that's fun and like a nice afternoon activity. It is.
Well,
Hmm.
yeah, it's just sort of a promote of it, and it's not necessarily that Trump is being a hypocrite. It's the idea of the enforcement of a social hierarchy. So the margin society, they get the cops exist to beat all those people up.
Yeah,
The vigilantes exist to take out essentially poor people or desperate people.
yeah.
Even the sport shoplifters, it's not going to be like, say, Giuliani's daughter who was busted for shoplifting from a
The
nicer,
Winona Ryder.
no one's going to
Actually,
do that.
most of the people like in my experience, the majority of shoplifters are white teenage girls and white ladies with the double strollers. Actually, like I don't know if you remember those; they're not as big of a thing anymore. But the double strollers and postpartum depression, like that is who stole from us. But the thing is, I have worked retail, and I cannot tell you how many times I had to be like, no, those black people are not shoplifting. Please stop following them around. Like it was
Mhm.
so pervasive. I cannot even begin to tell you. I mean, I'm sure that but like it was a battle I waged for the 10 years I was in that
Yeah,
industry.
oh, yeah.
Um,
That's usually like sort of I'm someone who loves grifter con movies and stuff like that, and and not that those things are based in truth, but it's like the format of it and sort of the I think because it's theater, like doing a con is like sort of putting on a performance. But anyway, I think one of them once had the idea of like get the black person to be the decoy, and then you get the very you know, peaches and cream complexion white lady to kind of be robbing the place blind. Meanwhile,
mhm.
they're working together. But that's sort of the thing, like you're taking advantage of people's bigotry, and rightly so. Just very quickly, I know you have some other just depressing things to discuss, but one thing. So, Dianne Feinstein, long-standing senator, had passed away this week.
R.I.P.
I'm sorry.
I said R.I.P. Or
Yes. And so the discussion now is about, and I'm writing about this for tomorrow, is about Gavin Newsom having to pick a replacement for it. And obviously, with some due speed, because now, you know, you're down to sort of only 50 senators. So and two of them are Manchin and Sinema, who's not necessarily a Democrat, but caucusing with
Mhm.
Democrats. So I just want to go back to the timing of this. So in February of 2021, um, Newsom told Joy Reid, and this is when he'd had some of his issues during the pandemic when he spotted at French Laundry and whatever, and he was now facing potentially a recall. And so he made the stance that he was going to pick a black woman to fill Feinstein's seat if she retired or otherwise vacated it.
Mhm.
And so uh, then once she officially retired, or said she was going to retire at the end of her term, and then you started having people saying they wanted the job, including
Yeah.
Barbara Lee, who is black. Then he sort of said, "Oh wait, I don't want to influence the election, so I'm going to pick a just
Oh, he's so fair.
a seat warmer person," and which is a political choice that has nothing to actually do for the
Also, that
benefit.
person could still run.
Well, yes, I don't think it's a contract, but yes, they could, but they would not, most likely would not. There's several problems with that. Now, yes, they have done, caretaker Democrats in the past, caretaker senators in the past. Most recently, when John McCain passed away,
Mhm.
but that was a former senator. So, like, the most obvious choice would be Barbara Boxer, right? She's done it. She comes
Mhm.
in, has been doing it, could handle it, and then would go back into retirement. But like, it's insulting to black women
Yeah.
especially when there are more women named Tammy in the Senate than there are Black women, like that you're going to have one of them just be sort of a drive-through senator who then will stand down to make way for a white guy because that's who's going to win. Like we all
Sorry, I'm
know.
losing it over Tammy. Like, I did not like that is quite the statistic.
It's shit. I mean, obviously, Schiff. I'm sorry, Darren. This is so it's not influent. Okay, there are two things here. One being, if you believe, like, what was the point of the idea is that
Yeah.
this is an
Which
historically
it makes sense
underrepresented.
to begin with because it does
Yes,
not. He's painting
no, no,
like
never say that to begin with. I didn't like it when Biden said it because it's insulting. Just say I'm going to pick the best person, and
yeah,
then pick woman after woman after woman, black
yeah.
woman after black woman to woman, and defy them to say otherwise.
And then just be like,
But
this is the best person for the job. Hello. Like,
but if you're saying I believe strongly that black women should be represented in the Senate, there is a historically underrepresented group. I don't know. Maybe you might take a affirmative action here and pick her. But
also,
like
like,
somehow, but the idea that I'm sorry, the idea that this influences the election. One, I think the power of incumbency is sort of overstated in this regard, especially she would have like a year in the Senate. And also, she has none of the money. Schiff has all of the money.
yeah.
He's known across the world. He has the active support of Nancy Pelosi, the former who
Hmm.
Nancy Pelosi, who did in fact, she has actively influenced the election where
Yeah.
she said, of my three colleagues running, I picked that guy. I picked the white
Yeah.
guy, not the white woman or the black woman, which
Hmm.
is fine. You pick the person, she picked the person who ideologically conforms to her, similar to as she did in Texas
Yeah.
with the anti-choice guy. But don't do this whole thing. Democrats sometimes do this whole thing of like, vote like black women and identity politics uber alles, and it's always a shield for your own policy or ideology
Hmm.
preferences. Just admit that it's all about ideology. Just like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to vote for Nikki Haley over a white guy just because Nikki Haley is a brown woman. Nikki Haley's a terrible politician. So it's not about identity. It's about what you're going to do for certain people and how you represent certain people. So it was hilarious. Also, someone suggested at New York Magazine that maybe he would pick Lee if she withdrew her candidacy because she's going to lose anyway. So she
Oh, I
could
didn't know
then
she.
get it for you. But this is not, it's not like this isn't high school, Robin. This isn't
Yeah.
like I was senator
Also,
for a
is he not
year
gonna
and
like?
you apply. She wants to actually do stuff. The idea is I want to represent black women and maybe do stuff for you. I just don't want to like check a box. It's like the worst of democratic identity politics. Like,
Hmm. Yeah, and Barbara Lee, historically most prematurely correct senator or congresswoman in history, is the thing about her. Like, she's very early on being correct about everything. So perhaps she's correct on the fact that she should be senator. She knew that we shouldn't have gone into Iraq. Perhaps she knows that she would be a better senator than Adam Schiff, which I believe she would be. I
yeah.
mean, honestly, I'd be really happy with either her or Katie Porter. And the thing is, I think that, you know, eventually Newsom would have to, back one of the candidates, right? Like, he'd have to.
No, he can stay out of it. He can stay out of it until it's either one, or I think most likely he will stay out of it because only apparently Nancy Pelosi can actively engage into it, and she's far more powerful than Newsom. Like the idea that he has somehow more power than he could influence. As Michael had noted, Kelly Loeffler lost as an incumbent against Raphael
Mhm.
Warnock, flipping a seat. She was in office far longer.
It
So
would
I
just be a
mean,
lot more. Yeah.
the idea, the presentation that somehow the guy who's far more well known, so the white man who's far more well known, has all the West Coast money. If you look at, he's raised so
Mhm.
much money and has the full support of the Democratic establishment, including Nancy Pelosi. So not just nationally, but within California, one of the most powerful women in politics,
Mhm.
people in politics. And oh my goodness, oh, that poor white guy. It'd be so unfair if, Gavin Newsom makes Barbara Lee, who's polling at 7% currently, has none of that shift money, that if she was the incumbent, oh my God, magically, he would be so it'd be so hard for him to win. Like, that's just, come on. Like, if you want to say this, but no one
And you know what? I don't.
realistically
You know
believes
what? I will
that.
tell you, Barbara Lee would do such a good job that Adam Schiff would back the hell off. I bet. Like, it's my personal belief. I really like Barbara Lee.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is clearly I mean, look, I mean, as I said, Nancy Pelosi has every right to support the white guy over the white woman or the black woman. But I wish Democrats would stop with the identity politics stuff that makes them look like frauds whenever they do this. So even now, when after Feinstein's dying, they list, and she's accomplished many things, but I always like when you list like, oh, she was one of the first women who did this, this, and this, and it's like, okay, well, to what a point is it about a woman versus everything else? Because when you have a chance to make a choice between a white guy and a woman, you choose the white guy, which is fine, but don't like try to sell us on this sort of thing. And this whole drive-through senator thing, I think someone had commented that obviously no very few black women who would be qualified for the drive-through Senate position would take it because it's a clear snub to Barbara Lee. The idea is that you are
Mhm.
out of the running because you actually said you wanted the job, which I think so many black women could identify with. Um, and I think that's just it is absurd. Newsom never should have said it, but he said it to win an election. Um, and I think black women can kind of get that. So I think obviously he's looking at his long-term career, and you don't want to piss off Nancy Pelosi. You don't want to piss off the power structure. But when it comes down to it, he's gonna I think this is not going to be as easy for him as he thinks later down the line, when I think people are going to be like, look, this is when you had the chance to make a bold choice and you didn't. And
Mhm.
no, thank you. But yeah, the optics of like the only black woman in the Senate potentially for decades, like, because if you look at the states, like,
Mhm.
when would a black, like, for decades, the basically standing down to cede the floor to a white guy, no matter how well you think of the guy, it's gonna look like garbage. So you know but it's,
No, it is definitely not going to go well.
and it's interesting because like Barbara Lee, I adore Barbara Lee, but she's 77 years old. She'll be
I
like
was gonna, that,
84
that
at
is
the end
the
of her
only
term. Well,
like.
no, I mean, I think she'll probably finish her term, but it's not like we're putting her in and blocking Porter and Schiff, even if she were to win.
Yeah.
It's not like you're blocking them forever. Like, Schiff would be in his mid to late 60s by the end of her term, where I think she could probably only realistically
Mhm.
serve one more term. But yes, I mean, she's most likely not going to get it. They're probably going to find some. I mean, they were like, I think it's really like some, I don't, I mean, California is a large state and probably deserves a senator who, isn't just trying to learn the job for a year. Like, this idea of how the Senate is, of where it's just like, all you got to do is show up and vote and there's nothing else to it, is really destructive. So if he's not going to, fulfill the promise in a meaningful way, just pick Barbara Boxer and do what's right for California, and then admit I effed up, but I'm going to do what's right for California and pick an actual caretaker who's done the job, instead of like picking like some random black woman who's never been in the Senate. Yeah, but that's just me. Um,
I mean, I do think, yes, like I definitely like love Barbara Lee. I also think that like, this is sort of the problem that we've been discussing before about how, Democrats do not have a very deep bench as far as, higher office goes, because of the fact that we keep people in the Senate forever. We keep people in Congress forever and ever. And then we, you know, presidential, nomination time comes around and we're like, why are all these people over 70? That's weird. Um, I just, you'd think at some point they'd be like, hey, let's try and, get some people who are younger in just like a little bit somewhere here and there. But that's probably not going to happen because people have
No,
to pay their dues.
Democrats are obsessed with dues paying and actually credentials, despite and
Mhm.
they're not even consistent with it. So then, when Feinstein, many had argued, was not particularly perhaps competent to do the job, they said, "Oh, no, don't worry, she's got a great staff." But then when you talk about like
Mhm.
electing, and obviously I was not that supportive of Buttigieg during the 2020 primary, but then it's like, oh no, he doesn't have the
Oh, I
experience.
didn't notice.
Well, he doesn't have the experience. It's like, well, who cares? Like, wouldn't he just do the Feinstein principle and be surrounded by a good staff of people? Because ultimately, what matters is getting elected, right? And it's sort of weird as
Oh, like,
well.
a great staff of people only counts when it's like someone that they want.
And
That was what they said about Trump too, by the way. The
well, yeah,
Republicans, the not normal, but like the non like MAGA Republicans.
and people are still sort of saying, well, Buttigieg was only a mayor of a small state, whatever, and he's not as qualified for like 2028. And my sense is sort of, again, from a campaign standpoint, there were a lot of he did far better than a
Mhm.
lot of far more experienced Democrats, including the current VP.
Yeah.
So he won Iowa, he beat Biden in New Hampshire. Like, he did pretty well for himself, and I think he ran a far more organized campaign. He was getting donors from Harris, so that is actually what counts. Similar with Obama versus Clinton in 2008. I mean, the old saying is like, the campaign you run is reflective of the administration you will run. It's sort of the
Mhm.
same structure. So that, to me, is like, the person running the better campaign is the one I'm probably going to be like, let's give this person a shot.
Really? I'm just saying because you were
Uh,
didn't care much for the
no,
Buddha.
no, no. I mean, it's not like, I mean, it will depends on who's running in
I'm just using
2028 or
you.
whatever. But I I'm still sort of a Whitmer. I think
Yeah.
Whitmer is probably one of our better choices as well, for
Oh,
having actually carried a Midwestern state and has executive experience. But no, no,
he
I
also
think
has great taste in leather jackets.
yes, true. Yes, my issues with Buttigieg, I think, is sort of not that he is, again. I just hate the idea of dues paying and all this sort of
Yeah,
stuff.
no, the whole dues
Nonsense.
paying thing has got to go because we're cheating ourselves out of like a lot of very good candidates by insisting on sticking to these rules. And by the time people are done paying their dues and being beaten down enough so that they're moderate enough for certain people, um
Yeah, well,
they're 87 years old.
I to me, it's like, when will certain Democrats get off themselves on this when they're telling me democracy is at stake? It certainly is. Taylor Swift is 35 in 2024. I'd fucking vote for her and have her sweep all 50 states or whatever, if that means I'm staying out of a concentration camp. And
Yep.
then, don't get, like, don't lecture me about who's the most qualified, when ultimately what is keeping Stephen Miller out of the White House is going to depend on, you know, very average human beings who don't care about resumes voting. It's a popularity
Mhm.
contest, and you can yell at me about how it shouldn't be, but I'm just a black guy out here trying to survive.
Yeah.
So uh,
Oh, oh. So Taylor Swift. President Taylor Swift. I think it could work. I did enjoy how very mad she got the entire right this week. Like they're all like, I keep forgetting what that guy's name is, but she's dating a football man, and they're all mad about her dating the football man.
yeah, I think they were hoping that Taylor Swift is
Hulse or
going to be
Kelsey?
their anti Beyonce, their anti Beyonce. So she was going to be a right winger and the sort of Sarah Palin esque style.
Yeah. Well, they were like,
You
"Oh
know,
my
it
god,
wasn't
she's,
for her.
our Aryan princess with blonde hair and blue eyes." And so the Nazis were obsessed with her for years. She was like their fake girlfriend. And then they were betrayed because she revealed herself to be somewhat liberal and then
Yeah.
told people to register to vote, which is like the worst thing you can do as far as they're concerned. They don't want anyone voting.
I just like the guy, the Federalist, stating about how um, she sucks and her music sucks. It's very pathetic. And one other guy responded from the Federalist, looking like a Republican who works for the Federalist, saying, "And she's homely," which she, we're all
Oh, yeah,
beautiful
they
and
all tried like Taylor Swift isn't that pretty. Like
we're all beautiful in God's eyes, but like Taylor Swift is attractive in the non-God's eye way, in the way that people pay lots of money to look at you way, which is so the idea is like, okay, whatever, dude. Like you can say this. It's just sort of the utmost. He should have just taken it. He should have tweeted that while eating sour grapes or something. Like, okay, like look,
no, it was all
get over
so like
yourself.
this incredible rage. They were just like, he's out there getting the vaccine and doing commercials for Bud Light and dating Taylor Swift, which sounds like an awesome life, quite frankly. Like he's doing well.
Yes,
I believe he is also very good at playing the football. People are into that. And they feel like so betrayed because again, like I guess they thought he was one of them. And so now they're like, oh, he's going woke. No, can't we have anyone? And the one thing that I am scared about as far as taking sports away from these people is like, will it make them more crazy? Like, are they becoming more crazy because they don't have sports anymore? Like, is that a possibility? I don't know.
well, they've never remember. They're very upset because of Muhammad Ali, and
Yeah.
they've always been somewhat upset when they don't want certain things. They want everything, and so they get upset where anything starts to get taken away from them, any part of the culture or the world, and they react as
Oh
you.
no, I just meant because like sports tend to be like a proxy for like war on some level. Like they can hate people and like be super in favor of one group and blah 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 without like any kind of, I don't know. I just kind of think like, what if they true like is it's going to push them even further? Which I think it. I'm not saying that they shouldn't, but that it is not funny that we are taking sports away from them. Well, I think it's hilarious. I do. I think it's very amusing. Sports and beer. Let's take away sports, beer, everything, so they have nothing left. I want them to be miserable at this point. But like, I don't know. Like, I feel like everything is making them increasingly crazy these days.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you get to the point of where like all of
Not mad at
culture no longer makes sense to me, and
that.
everything,
Mhm.
whatever, you start to slowly go insane becomes the problem, and that's kind of where they're going. Very upset with Taylor Swift, and they want. So they never got over the sort of the Michelle Obama things. Michelle Obama is incredibly popular,
Oh yeah.
um, and I think more
Other-
so. So like Hillary Clinton wasn't just the first lady; she wasn't necessarily popular in the ways that first ladies. She wasn't sort of anywhere near kind of a Jackie O level of
no,
popularity
no, people
in
hated
those ways. And Michelle Obama was, and they sort of resented, and so you got all these things of
Oh,
because
the
they
Vogue
felt like
covers.
was
The
being
Vogue
taken away.
covers drove them absolutely insane. Like they spent all of the Trump years going like, why isn't Melania on Vogue? Why was Michelle Obama on Vogue? And why can't and she's a model and she should be on Vogue and they should be covering her fashions, but they're not. And like it was very like very amusing. But they absolutely resented the hell out of Michelle Obama for that.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, there's still the rumor. Ted Cruz. Speaking of Michelle Obama, Ted Cruz has said repeatedly that on his podcast, because that's what he does for a living, was a podcast. He said that they're going to, at the last minute, replace Biden with Michelle Obama. Um, which is just such an absurd concept. Like, and he says it, and he's one of those people. I mean, there's many reasons to not like Ted Cruz. He's someone who, when he's proven wrong, just never, it just says, oh, yeah, I was wrong. Like, there's no self efface. Like, he'll just be like, yeah, I said something completely absurd and ridiculous that didn't happen. And I'm going to keep saying stuff that's absurd and ridiculous. So, um, but yeah, no, Michelle Obama is not going to be running. I don't think, unlike my Taylor Swift, Elizabeth Olsen ticket that I was proposing, I don't think that um, I actually don't think that Michelle Obama would do necessarily any better than Obama had done, though Obama did very well. Um, I don't. I mean, I did see Bill Maher is hardly one of my favorite people. He had he was back this week, and he was talking about how Joe Biden shouldn't run again. Joe Biden's too old, and that sort of thing. And it was just kind of like, I'm sort of, and this is an irritating thing about people, about me. If you had to work with me in corporate America, which was just like, I just refuse to engage in any idea on the merits of it. I didn't want to discuss. It was wasting time if there was no time to actually execute the idea. So it's like, okay, well, yeah, like maybe that could work, but it's not. We can't do it. Let's talk about what's realistic. So there just is no time right now to replace Joe Biden. It's not going to happen. So Joe Biden's the nominee. Like, we can just like, okay, he's old. I get it. And his popularity is not ideal. His approval ratings aren't great, but there is no other, there's no time to get another nominee. And we can't even, it's not worth even discussing whether we should, like, because it's not going to happen. Um, but there's a lot of people are getting writing posts and writing things saying we need to replace Biden. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I do like this is the thing. I do get why people are nervous. It's nerve wracking. Um, it maybe was not the best plan to begin with, but now we are stuck with that plan, like,
Mhm.
which is, it's not great, but what are you gonna
Yeah,
do?
I just
Um,
I felt like I encountered so many people who got it in their mind, and these are people who were Biden voters before I was. When I was like, hey, maybe Warren could do it or whatever. I've been writing it because when people have the fantasy about Trump not being the nominee, I kind of give them. I show polls where Liz Warren was leading polls this time last year.
mhm.
Or like was like 5 points behind Biden in certain polls, whereas
Biden
Nikki Haley
was like very low in the polls throughout the primary.
even when
Like
he
you
was
saw it at the
ahead,
top and
people
then just
were,
like went down
yeah,
because
like he was within, even when he was ahead of polls, she was within striking distance or whatever, or
I
Sanders
mean,
was
let's
ahead
be
of a
real,
poll.
but we're not
It
for
was a real,
yeah.
it was a real competition. Whereas Nikki Haley's at 6%, like she's never going, like she's not going to win. That's like some sort of
Yeah.
fantasy. Um, and but Nikki Haley actually, sorry, slight digression. So Nikki Haley, um, is very upset because or very happy because Trump is like pissed off at her. So this means that she's now number two. It's like, well, great, she, and Trump did just what I had anticipated, because the whole thing was that she, people thought, oh, she's running for vice president. It's like, well, no, he's not going to pick anyone who dared run against him. You're still trying to think of Trump as a normal person. And
Because he thinks
Trump
anyone who
said,
runs against him is betraying him.
yeah, so he said officially, I will neither MAGA, so his entire mob, nor I will ever support Bird Brain Nikki Haley. That's his new name, Bird Brain. And she was like excited. Well, this means I'm number two. No, it doesn't. Well, it means you're literally, like, figuratively number two, because you aren't going to, you can't win, even if by some miracle Trump could, you actually won, which won't happen. Trump is already saying, "I will see you lose horribly. I will tell all my supporters,
If
do
Trump
not
isn't the
support
nominee,
you."
he's going to take down whoever is.
Yes, like that's a given. And
Like,
every time they ask, like Nikki Haley's the one saying, "Oh, I will support him even if he's convicted because Kamala is so terrible." Okay, well, that means that Trump has the better electability argument, because he's saying, I will not support anyone who's not me. And that means a complete wipeout. Republicans are always terrified of that.
Mhm.
So uh, apparently, so Nikki Haley today showed tweeted a photo of apparently someone sent her a bird cage, and it was said from the Trump campaign. And she was like, "This comes from the Trump campaign," and then someone uh, called her, accused her of staging it, right? Because Trump campaign was spelled correctly, so I guess that's one sign that maybe it wasn't from an actual MAGA person. Um, and but also it's like, no, Nikki, I'd actually be more concerned about car bombs, not like
Yeah.
juvenile
I
pranks
mean,
like that. Like,
those people are pretty regularly, and wasn't there, wait, what was the one this week where the guy, some QAnon guy was arrested for making threats against an unnamed female member of Congress, probably AOC, because I think she usually is the recipient of those. Hold on, let me see. Like, these people are not messing around even remotely. Um, uh, news. I swear to God, it was just like a thing that just happened, but everything that I'm looking up says is just like for QAnon shaman guy. But no, there was a guy arrested this week. He was like, believing in all of that shit. Like, I read all of the things that these people have to say regularly. They are insane. Like,
mhm.
they are, like, they actually truly believe that, like, any day now there are going to be like these mass arrests, and they're going to get to watch everyone they dislike be hanged in public, like, and they're very excited for this. They're
Yeah,
really hoping for this moment, and like, so these are not, the Trump people are not dangerous.
yeah.
Like,
I just what's your take on that? Like, are these Republicans, especially Nikki Haley, just completely naive, or are they like, or maybe secretly they're
I
scared?
no, well, here's the thing. Um I think Nikki Haley is a, like, very Beltway type in a certain way. Like, she's very like, like how, like, all the Beltway pundits are like, everyone loves moderates and people who are like generally good looking and look presidential physically in their face and have paid their dues, and don't say anything that scares people. And that's not actually what people are that into, as it turns out, if you look at like everything ever. Um, I think that she very much believes that there it really is this like huge contingent of Republicans and perhaps more conservative Democrats who are just very thirsty for a normal Republican to, take the reins and bring the party back to where it was. But there aren't actually that many of those people. Like, there's nowhere near as many of them as there are like the MAGA fools.
Yeah, but beyond just her inability to win anything, and apparently Republicans are so desperate they're going to Glenn Youngkin, who is equally useless. But um, isn't she worried? Like Mitt Romney was having like major, he's paying out of his own pocket for security, and like, isn't she worried? Like, this is a mobster. Like Trump is a criminal, and he happily laughs at and his supporters having attacked an old man, Nancy Pelosi's husband, and
Yeah.
is not just being a gross jerk about it, right? It's implicit in his mob way, being, I like it when my supporters hurt people who don't support me. And
Oh,
for
I
Nikki
absolutely believe that.
And so for Nikki Haley to not get that, I don't know. Is she out of it? Like, no, no, no. Like, I it's not like you're lucky that you are not going to win. So the fact that you're excited now that he's gotten your attention, that you've gotten his attention, you should be worried about your kids and your family. Like, he is targeting his supporters on you. And there isn't like, oh,
People
we're
he
all
just told,
Republicans.
"You should go out and shoot people in parking lots if you think they've been stealing." Like,
Well, maybe they still
I
think
don't
there's this
know.
the old Reagan era thing of we're all Republicans and Democrats are our enemies, but we're still failing. Republicans like, no, no, no. Marjorie Taylor Greene will shoot either one of you. Like
Yeah.
anyone who's not standing up to Trump. And I think that remains the establishment Republicans' cluelessness on that. I mean, a lot of establishment Democrats as well, but the idea that these are very dangerous people. And I don't want to see anyone harmed, but the luckiest thing for them has been that it hasn't been like the 2020 Democratic primary where it was actually competitive for a while or some places. And it, this is like a wipeout, and he's just acting out just to be petty, but no one's gonna touch him. Um, so I remember I mentioned this, I think, to Rebecca because she was like, "Well, there's a chance that he might not be the nominee." And it's like, "Well, yeah, generally speaking, though, when the front winner is like 50 points ahead of everyone, your hope is that maybe that guy will get indicted,
Yeah.
and then I can swoop in."
I
But it's
mean,
like, well,
yeah.
he kind of like what? So like Nikki Haley's the one who has to worry about like, oh, well, maybe there will be a scandal. For me, there's no October surprise or anything for Trump because like
You
he's
can't
guilty of
October surprise
everything.
him. Like, he is October surprise proof. Like, no matter what, like, they could be like, hey, guess what? He was super best friends with Fidel Castro. And then even like all the Cubans who, Republican Cubans who like him would be like, yes, no, we're totally fine with that. You can't, there's nothing that you could do to him that would make any of his people turn on him. Like, it's not happening. And that's, what gets him off. Like,
Yeah. Well,
he likes having crazy pants loyal followers.
we almost at time. Do you have anything to sing us off toward, Robin?
Uh, sorry. Like, I mean, I can go back to singing like jazz hot. No. I don't know. What are you working on for tomorrow?
Yeah, so I'm doing the Gavin Newsom, and then and the whole Barbara Lee issue he has, and also something about the great Gloria Johnson, who Republicans had in Tennessee had been mocking for her disability. She uses a scooter, and so someone
Mhm.
had been mocking her for having to for being disabled because
Nice people.
that's what Republicans are. Um, and but she's great. I wish she could beat Marsha Blackburn, even though Tennessee is very difficult. Though, if you wish to do well in Tennessee, and I was writing about this week, don't trash um, Taylor Swift and Dolly Parton. So there are some folks,
Yeah.
there's some liberals I saw who were like, "Well, they can't. White women suck in Tennessee, and it has to be black women." It's like, okay, well, every black woman in the world voted for Biden in Tennessee. He still got whomped. Like, it's a math issue. So either we win over white people, particularly white women in Tennessee, or we don't. But that's going to be the key. Maybe it's not possible, but I've always found that insulting people doesn't help. Like,
I do feel like you are correct there.
maybe being nice to them won't
I
work.
do think, like, one thing that you got to say that I always say about Democrats is they do very deeply believe that insulting people is the way. They're like, if you insult people and tell them that they're trash, they'll vote the way that you want them to vote because they won't want to be trash. And things like absolutely do not work that way. There are like 80, like, I always love the people with the bios that are like, I'm smashing Twitter leftists so that they feel bad about not voting for Biden. I don't like,
Yeah.
so they work their ways. And I'm just like, this is objectively insane. I don't even like,
And I'm gonna have some folks talking about this at some point on my podcast as well. But there's this whole thing of where a lot of diversity, equity, inclusion training or whatever has been necessarily failing, frankly, because it kind of comes in and say, Robin, you're hopeless. You suck. You're white. I know you mean well. Everywhere you mean well fails. You need to just sort of. It's like I don't go as far as comparing it to Maoist type of stuff of like you have to hate yourself to be redeemed or whatever. But it comes to that. And what happens is like a lot of people are like, okay, well, I guess I suck. I guess I'll go back and suck. And like it's not necessarily motivating. And if you're like me, I kind of want things to get better. I want to sort of go to the idea of, hey, Robin, maybe things can be great and we can be a world that treats people well regardless of your background. And I don't think I need to start with like, hey, the way your hands move when you talk is white supremacy. Like, okay, because that's just like, I feel like that's the point where you're like, I can't, okay, I can't do that. I can't go to hand school, so I guess I'm gonna have to, I guess I'm gonna be a racist forever, right? Like I can't, oh, I laugh when
They
I talk
did
to a
actually
black
do that to
person.
Bernie Sanders, though. They were like, he talks with his hands, and that I don't know if they said it was racist, but they were like, that is triggering. And it was the accent that was triggering and the hand moving. And I was like, I don't really understand where you're going with that, but also I have, I grew up having a fairly similar accent, and also, which is gone now, thank God. I worked very hard on that, but it wasn't, mine was not cute. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I was like, uh-oh, I also talk with my hands and sometimes
Oh
talk like
yeah,
that. Like that doesn't really seem to have anything to do with anything. Um,
it's not effective, but a lot of this stuff is out there that's kind of, and I feel like it has to be confronted because I'm in a sense of I want this to work and it is not working. It is actually pushing away potential allies. And as
yeah,
someone said, like, well, why do I have to be nice to white women? It's like, I don't know. I mean, they're a big part of the electorate. And again, like being a jerk to someone doesn't help. I don't see how that helps. Like maybe, I don't know. Give empathy a try. Maybe
well,
I'm like,
listen,
I don't
I'm
know.
just gonna say most of the people I hear saying that are in fact white women themselves.
Yes, and
Like,
that to
that's
me is
really the
that's
majority of people who are saying that they are in
yeah.
fact white women.
But aren't
Um,
you and that's the
Many of
worst,
them used to
right?
be
Like it's like
Republicans.
everyone sucks except me. Like
Like,
I'm just kind of
I
like,
was a
oh
Republican
man,
strategist, and now,
all men suck except me. I'm the best man. It's like don't
yeah,
listen to every that guy has bodies in a closet somewhere. Like don't trust the person who says everyone all people like me suck except me. Because then it's
yeah,
kind of like, all right, well, if I'm redeemable, maybe other people like maybe other men are redeemable. Let's figure out how to work through this. If I'm a white woman who's decent, maybe other white women can be decent. Here's how we can come through this. But I think the idea has to be let's not treat people like assholes. And On that, thank you for joining us on this holy day of Julie Andrews. And Like, share, subscribe, all the goodies. We'll catch you again next time.
oh, baby, won't you play me let jazz hot, maybe? Dee, 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 and the